Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Are you ready? Hey everybody, it's Jeff. How's everyone doing today? I hope they're doing better than we've been doing. And the weather here is been cloudy most of the week because remnants of Hurricane Lee are still sliding up the coastline, so we're getting the edge of it. And we're supposed to get a lot of rain on Friday, probably up to 2 inches of rain here. Maybe some wind, I don't know. It's what they're saying for Friday. But we're getting rain right now. I mean, we had heavy showers that, really like, friggin', group urinal sessions here outside, and then a little bit of a break where the sun was peeking out and then cloud back in and whoosh, another one, so that's what's been going on here. So obviously that has to be part of the hurricane too, that's still inching its way up the coast. So we're getting drenched, we're getting all the water that everybody else needs in the other parts of this country. I don't know, there has to be some way that people can get that water somehow where they need it, instead of just, Anyway, still much talk about whether or not Trump should be on the ballot to run for president. And I found a pretty good article here that I want to read, and it really kind of explains it a whole lot better than I did in the last video that I made here. Hold on a second. Yeah, so anyway, it explains it a whole lot better than I did in the last video, and I'm hoping that this might answer some people's questions, because I did get some feedback from it on another web page where people come on to mine and then they talk to me there, because I'm mostly there instead of YouTube. This is just, I have a lot more people that I talk to there. So anyway, here is the article. It's from The Big Picture, written by Jay Kuo. It's entitled, "We're on a collision course with the 14th Amendment and Trump." Is Donald Trump ineligible to hold federal office under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? That's been a topic of discussion among constitutional scholars for some time now. If you look strictly at the text of that section, you can see why there is an argument to be made. Section 3, disqualification from holding office. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, who, having previously taken an oath as an officer of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. The theory caught a big uplift when two respected conservative legal scholars affiliated with the Federalist Society released a preprint version of their work to be published in the University of Pennsylvania Law Review. William Baude of the University of Chicago and Michael Stokes Paulson of the University of St. Thomas took a close look at the history behind the section and concluded that Trump is barred by it, claiming it is not even a close question. Quote, Donald Trump cannot be president, cannot run for president, cannot become president, cannot hold office unless 2/3 of Congress decides to grant him amnesty for his conduct on January the 6th, unquote, Baude said to the New York Times, summarizing the piece. Then, two other legal heavyweights weighed in with the same conclusion. Judge J. Michael Luttig of the Fourth Circuit and Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard University published a piece in The Atlantic that raised the question to national prominence, with both making the rounds on news talk shows to drive home their legal conclusion. Trump is disqualified and simply can't be on the ballot. This didn't remain in the realm of the theoretical for long. Just last week, the group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, working with 6 Republican and unaffiliated Colorado voters, including former state, federal, and local officials, and backed by 3 private law firms, filed suit in Colorado to block Donald Trump from being added to the presidential ballot for 2024. And this is just the beginning of such suits. CREW, C-R-E-W, intends to file others. We can now expect challenges across the country. So, is Trump ineligible to run? The very short answer to this is, quote, we don't know, unquote. Ultimately, this is likely headed to the Supreme Court, but the question necessarily contains other very important ones to consider that not many are yet asking. First, how is the question most likely to wind its way through the court system and then get before the High Court? This is an important consideration to think through because it would directly impact the scope and effect of any Supreme Court decision. Second, how might various suits impact the presidential race? To understand this, we need to closely follow the legal paths the challenges to Trump's eligibility will take, including their timing. Third, what happens in the wake of a likely Supreme Court ruling? That ruling could come out 3 basic ways. Number 1, the answer no. Section 3 can't be applied to disqualify Trump. Number 2, the answer is yes, he is disqualifiable. Or number 3, answer maybe, but it's up to each state to decide. With respect to the last 2 options, I haven't seen much written about the likely effect of a disqualification or a punt by the Supreme Court. Both results are possibly chaos-inducing, as I'll discuss in greater measure below. In this piece, I'll summarize the best arguments each side has for why Donald Trump is or isn't disqualified from running under Section 3. Then we'll walk through the 3 questions I laid out above to try and make sense of the procedural and political mess that this question might wind up creating. The legal argument for Trump's disqualification. There are 3 key things to understand here about the arguments made by both the Federalist Society scholars and the concurrence of Judge Luttig and Professor Tribe that Trump is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. First, they argue that Section 3 remains viable and enforceable, and that the historical record shows it wasn't limited in some way to the events of the Civil War. It wasn't repealed by later legislation, including the Amnesty Act of 1872. It was never relegated to some historical shelf any more than other parts of the U.S. Constitution. It is as much a part of the document as any other amendment, and we cannot simply ignore it as if it's not there. It plainly is, and we must pay it due heed. Second, they assert that the clause is, quote, self-executing, unquote, meaning that it doesn't take some additional act of Congress or even a criminal conviction in court in order for these charges with defending the Constitution to act upon it. That includes every official at the state or federal level tasked with judging candidate qualifications. It is no different in principle, they assert, from the age and birthplace requirements that are already in the Constitution. Third, the range of conduct covered by, quote, insurrection or rebellion, unquote, or giving, quote, aid or comfort, unquote, to the enemies of the United States is quite broad and, they argue, would definitely include Trump's attempts to overturn the presidential election. Baud and Paulson compared other provisions of the Constitution using similar language, including, quote, the especially strong evidence from 1860 Civil War era political and legal usage of nearly the precise same terms, unquote, as well as early enforcement of the provision to support their claim. That led them to champion a, quote, broad understanding of what constitutes insurrection and rebellion, and a remarkably, almost extraordinarily broad understanding of what types of conduct constitute engaging in, assisting, or giving aid or comfort to such movements, unquote. The legal argument against Trump's disqualification. Much of the criticism of the originalist textual argument advanced by Baud and Paulson raises the specter of politicization of the power to disqualify. Do we really want to empower secretaries of the various states to decide on their own that certain candidates are or not qualified based on their alleged insurrectionist or rebellious behavior, or because they gave aid and comfort to the enemy? If we do that, critics argue, what's to stop red state officials from moving to keep Joe Biden off the ballot, for example, on the grounds of he also has given aid and comfort to our enemies? Has he not failed to halt the flow of migrants into the country, and isn't that disqualifying, and on and on? Otherwise put, do we want each and every state or even local election officials to have that kind of power and discretion? That would inevitably produce a patchwork of inconsistent rulings and further might disenfranchise voters by taking away their right to choose the candidate of their choice as such. Section 3 should and must be read as narrowly as possible. It follows from this that Section 3 should be interpreted to apply only to very clear-cut cases of insurrection or rebellion, as when someone has been convicted specifically of that crime, or of aiding and abetting a conspiracy against the United States. Short of that, and it opens a Pandora's box of problems. And unlike the Constitution's age and birthplace requirements to run for president, which are easily proven, or at least one would assume, absent the birther conspiracy, whether someone did or did not engage in insurrection or rebellion or give aid and comfort to the nation's enemies is a more complex question that would require a judge or jury to decide. And that, as I will discuss below, creates a host of potential inconsistent results. There are also some textual arguments against application of the section that are somewhat less compelling, including the argument advanced by former Attorney General Mike Mukasey in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that the ex-president of the United States is not covered by this clause because he was not an, quote, officer, unquote, within the meaning of the section. This feels like a stretch. First, the Constitution discusses the, quote, and unquote, office of the president in Article 2, Section 1. It's hard to see how the president would hold an office yet not be an officer. Further, there's no evidence that the drafters intended to exclude anyone official, let alone the president, from the application of Section 3. To the contrary, the question of whether it also covered the president was raised during debate and answered in the affirmative. How might the question arise in the lower courts? I want to preface this rest of this discussion with a disclaimer. Some of the procedural questions here grow so complex so quickly that I am a bit reluctant to place strong assurances on my own analysis. Even while writing this piece, I have had to reconsider and rewrite my own conclusions a few times as I pulled on some fraying legal threads. Indeed, there are so many permutations and possible procedural developments that At best here today, I can present only a few likely scenarios, each with questions that would need to be answered through rigorous advocacy by teams of lawyers on each side. That said, here are some of my thoughts on the complex procedural postures these cases could assume. Assuming for the moment that Section 3 is self-executing, meaning that the state officials charged with administering elections can and indeed must apply the constitutional limitation as part of their decision whether to place a candidate's name on the ballot, that presents some options for litigants. Plaintiffs, or in the Colorado suit, petitioners, as they say, because they are asking for a specific action from the court, could be voters who sue their own secretaries of state in state court to prevent them from placing Trump's name on the ballot. This is the situation with the lawsuit now pending in Colorado. The Trump campaign could also be named as a defendant in Colorado as a respondent, or in a different state could intervene in the case, if not named directly as a party, because it is Trump's name that will be on or off the ballot. Alternatively, other Republican candidates could sue a Secretary of State to keep Trump's name off the ballot, with their standing to sue far cleverer because they are directly harmed by Trump's inclusion. This hasn't happened yet, and it's unclear whether any GOP candidate would ever take this step. A Secretary of State unilaterally could decide to keep Trump's name off the state's ballot, expressing the belief that the Constitution requires it. This is a bit less likely now, given that there is already an active case in Colorado that we hope will result in guidance for other states. But it would eliminate some of the more tricky questions about standing, because it would force the Trump campaign to sue, and the campaign would definitely have standing. However, the case commences, it would likely remain in state court because Trump would have no grounds for removal to federal court. Trump is no longer a federal officer acting within the scope of his duties, but rather only a candidate for a federal office. Indeed, Trump's campaign earlier filed a notice of removal of the Colorado case, but then his lawyers realized they didn't really have grounds to remove it to federal court and withdrew the removal process request. How would the cases then proceed? We'll take a pause here to note where this leaves things. Plaintiffs, perhaps in separate cases across several states, will be seeking court declaration that Trump engaged in insurrection or rebellion or otherwise gave aid or comfort to the enemies of the U.S. through his actions and inactions around January the 6th. Importantly, these would not be criminal trials. Instead, they would be civil ones, which means the burden of proof would only be a preponderance of the evidence, or just over 50%. Because the petitioners are asking the court to declare Trump ineligible and enjoin him from appearing on the ballot, this is a quote-unquote bench trial, not a jury trial. For example, it was a single judge who issued a ruling after an evidentiary hearing in the unsuccessful suit brought to disqualify former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from the Georgia ballot on the grounds she participated in the insurrection at the Capitol. At the case's outset, Trump's attorneys could seek to dismiss for lack of standing or somehow raise an issue that would need to go up on appeal right away. Standing is a real threat here, as some earlier efforts to bring such cases have shown. To demonstrate standing, you have to show you personally were or will be injured, and that's just not that clear when it comes to keeping a name off a ballot. If those challenges are unsuccessful and the case goes forward, there would be inevitable battles over what the words like insurrection, rebellion, and aid or comfort mean in Section 3. And after a verdict, there would likely be appeals over just about anything that might have affected the case, including rulings about certain evidence coming in. What might the effects of a decision in one case be? Assuming there are multiple cases filed in several different states, things could get hairy very quickly. There are legal principles that would probably come into play that would operate to prevent inconsistent rulings. For example, one judge finding Trump did engage in or aid an insurrection, while another finding he did not. One principle that might possibly be relevant is res judicata, also known as, quote, claim preclusion, unquote. It generally prevents a party from raising a claim after it is subject to a final judgment. For claim preclusion to apply, however, all of the parties need to be the same in the challenged action as they were in the prior action. This principle might prevent a copycat action in the same state, but it likely wouldn't directly stop an action in a different state with a different Secretary of State. More on point is something called collateral estoppel, which sounds awfully complicated but isn't when explained in plain English. It prohibits the re-litigation of a factual or legal issue after a court has issued a final ruling on it. This could apply across jurisdictions, including between different states or courts. Collateral estoppel addresses the kind of problem we might face here. Multiple plaintiffs across different states all trying to strike Trump off their state ballots. If a judge declares that Trump violated the requirement of Section 3, and the appellate courts uphold that decision against legal challenges, then Trump could be barred from arguing on factual or legal grounds in a different case that he should not be disqualified. There are some interesting questions over whether Trump could already be barred by collateral estoppel from asserting certain defense due to prior adverse rulings in another January 6 case in federal court, but we shall save that discussion for another day. Because early cases, such as the one already underway in Colorado, may wind up presenting these legal and factual questions first, the Trump campaign's lawyers could conceivably ask other state court judges to stay any further cases that get filed until that case is done. Or perhaps his lawyers could get aggressive and file suit in another state to demand that Trump's name gets printed on the ballots, or perhaps bring in the case in an early state like Iowa in the hope of landing a more favorable judge. How might the U.S. Supreme Court get the case? In the Colorado case, any appeals of the district court's rulings would likely go to the Colorado State Appellate Court, then to its state Supreme Court. From there, if there is a question of constitutional interpretation, it could then go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The same would occur in any other state where an action might be filed. This is unless, of course, Trump's campaign found a way to take questions directly up to SCOTUS, perhaps by convincing red state attorneys general to sue to stop blue or purple states from barring Trump, making this a case between the states and therefore one of, quote, original jurisdiction, unquote, for the high court. If that sounds crazy, remember that red state AGs banded together before in 2020 to file a Hail Mary suit to overturn the election, and the Supreme Court ultimately declined to hear it. When it does get a case on appeal, the Supreme Court likely will have to smooth out some bumpy issues of law. For example, it will have to determine whether voters have standing to bring civil cases, whether such cases brought under a self-executing Section 3 are appropriate at all, or would first require an act of Congress or a criminal conviction, or if presidents are covered as officers by Section 3 in the first place. The Trump campaign could move to dismiss the case on these grounds and try to send that up to the flagpole right away. If the High Court allows Section 3 cases to move forward, it will at some point likely still have to provide some guidance about what the terms in that section actually mean and what standard to apply. For example, should courts look to the intent of the drafters at the time of the 14th Amendment, or will subsequent acts of Congress inform the word's meaning? Suffice it to say, there is no obvious and straight path up the Supreme Court, yet without its weigh-in, lower courts could be left in a state of confusion and chaos. Okay, let's go to commercial break and we'll return with the rest of this.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me!
This is me.
I'm Alex Curtis. I'm a lobsterman in Maine, and this is me.
I'm Ruth McLaughlin, and this is me.
I'm Eric Hopkins. I'm an artist, and this is me.
This is me.
Me.
This is me.
This is me.
This is me.
At the end of the journey, the main thing is you. Original.
Or what I should say, he only does what's right.
A Republican nominee that is not Trump will lose 40 states.
I'm old enough to remember that when the 9/11 terror attacks happened, Trump raced down to ground zero.
Here's the problem.
Hero!
Who's this? Come on.
Bro, you're already facing charges.
Yeah, I get it.
Go ahead and commit
So,
here this whole time.
This amendment that I will introduce will defund any federal prosecution of a presidential candidate prior to the November 24 election.
I haven't seen a sriracha bottle in 2 months. We
Is there a run on sriracha?
Sriracha is gone. The idea that they might propose that Americans be limited to 2 beers a week.
If they want us to drink 2 beers a week, frankly, they can kiss my ass.
No, okay. Senator, I brought a beer to drink with you. I'll drink this non-alcoholic beer with you because I'm not allowed to drink on camera, but...
One of the first hurricanes reported was, I think it was in the 1400s. Now, I would venture a guess that had nothing to do with fossil fuels.
Does anyone think Donny Osmond is not cute? Anybody? See, he's a cute. Nobody's hands up. He's been cute forever.
All of these claims that hurricanes and wildfires are the result of climate change and the hot weather happens in the summer.
We've heard allegations of bribery, money laundering going on in the Biden family. You're also saying that the Biden family or Joe Biden himself committed extortion? Is that what you just said?
Oh, absolutely.
I believe that he has gone mad. A stark, raving lunatic, going on extended vacations and sleep. That's what he wants to do. He wants to sleep and he wants to go to the beach and sleep. He thinks he looks good in a bathing suit. He doesn't. Rhino's got to go! Rhino's got to go!
For 248 years, the United States Marine Corps has valiantly defended this country against foreign enemies. The Marine Corps' legendary courage, determination, and skill on the battlefield leaves our enemies in fear and our allies in awe. Marines of every race, creed, and color have sworn a sacred oath to protect our Constitution. They fought, bled, and died for this country. Today, the Marine Corps faces a domestic enemy, a small man with a big mouth, determined to destroy the Corps for his petty political agenda. Tommy Tuberville is creating a national security nightmare. Who wins from Tuberville's attack on the Marine Corps? China, ISIS, Vladimir Putin. Tommy Tuberville insults every Marine who ever served, and he puts the men and women of the Marine Corps on the line in danger. Every U.S. Marine is a patriot. Tommy Tuberville is a traitor.
He's too old. He's out of touch, losing his marbles at an alarming rate.
They have sinks where no water comes out. You turn it on, no water comes out. You want to wash your hands, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen this, and you turn on the sink, and it's very little.
I do want to remind everybody, this is the guy that worked with the former Klansman.
I will be Donald Trump's most loyal advocate to make sure his nominees go to the Supreme Court.
Full of his struggles and ramblings and rantings and mumbling and bumbling and stumbling. You decide. Take a look.
They've deliberately surrendered our border to vicious coyotes and drug smugglers. I mean, these drug smugglers, the smuggler.
I find it awkward. I find it embarrassing. He's really in the early stages of some kind of senile dementia.
I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation, the beginnings.
It's more than awkward and embarrassing. It's actually dangerous. Having someone with his mental state, to me, is terrifying.
She speaks in rhyme.
In rhyme?
Well, the way she talks, the bus will go here and then the bus will go there because that's what buses do. And it's weird.
He can't finish a sentence.
Anonymous, really anonymous.
The man doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know where the exit is. He's not sure how to get through a speech.
Mr. President, you need to sign it. Old, outdated, retire, elderly, aging, senile, dementia, slow, confused, idiot, ignorant, sleepy, gaff, bumbling, bad, terrible, disappointing, joke, profanity.
Being corrupt is bad. Being corrupt and senile is even worse.
Might not want to show too much of the bottom part there, but without too many curse words here, sir. What are your thoughts?
I don't have friends. I don't have family.
He's honest. He cares about kids. He cares about guns. He cares about our country.
Trump is mean.
Right now, my rights are being denied by the FBI.
I'm a proud Polish person.
He tells the truth, never lies.
I'm old. You can see I'm old. I'm older.
We need to get down on our hands and knees and pray for this man to get into office.
Trump has a big mouth. We all have big mouths. Right, people? Trump! Trump! Trump!
His Christian values that he stands for.
We love Trump! We love Trump! We love Trump!
But definitely not woke, definitely not anything about any of that type of mentality.
Evil's taken over. Good needs to overcome the evil, and Donald Trump is going to do it.
King Jesus first and then King Trump.
And China. Put an end to it.
It's my birthday weekend.
The left and the rhinos, the globalists.
They Gilmore. Gilmore.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it. Write for Pollution Booklet, Box 1771, Radio City Station, New York.
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it. It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Continue on with this article here. How might the lawsuits affect the presidential race? Imagine this. By spring of 2024, judges in multiple states, including in some key battleground states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, or Arizona, are each weighing the question of whether Donald Trump is disqualified under Section 3. Some of these cases got going sooner, some later, meaning that some are headed toward a full evidentiary hearing or trial, while others are dormant or trailing. These planned evidentiary hearings are massive in scope, as complex and involved as the January 6 committee hearings. But with added time for the defense to cross-examine witnesses, some witnesses might resist the court summons and others might plead the fifth. Imagine some judges decide the state cases should defer to the calendar of the federal criminal cases, but some others say only to a point. After all, the decision needs to happen before ballots get printed. But because this is all discretionary, imagine that still other judges decide that their cases are ready to go and they don't yield any time at all. Trump could ask for stays in those cases, claiming he can't adequately defend them without prejudging his rights in a pending criminal matter. But such a stay is not automatic, and some judges might not agree. Trump could ask for bench trial dates far into the future, with his already packed schedule making it impossible for him to campaign and defend himself in court. That argument might carry little weight in a criminal court, but these are civil actions we're talking about here. Trump will likely point to all the cases as further evidence that they are doing everything they can to interfere with his election chances. He has already made this claim in Colorado, but many of these cases will have been brought by members of his own party, just as they were in Colorado. Precisely to blunt this point from here, Trump likely will blame, quote, rhinos, unquote, which means Republican in name only, for being complicit with the Democrats. And how will the other GOP presidential candidates respond? Will they condemn these civil suits, just as most have condemned the federal and state prosecutions, or will they defer to the courts on this? So far, there hasn't been much by way of protest against the Colorado suit from the other GOP candidates. What could happen in the wake of a SCOTUS ruling? As I discussed at the outset of this piece, there are three basic ways the Supreme Court could go. Trump cannot be disqualified under Section 3. Trump can be disqualified under it, or maybe yes, maybe no. If SCOTUS rules that Trump's name must remain on the ballot in a separate, perhaps despite a trial judge's ruling to the contrary, this would be seen by many as an anti-constitutional move or as political favoritism by the right-leaning court, in a time when faith in the impartiality of the Supreme Court is at an all-time low. Watching it step in to protect Trump from a verdict against him might erode what little trust still remains. Still, from the point of view of democracy, this outcome might be preferable unless the next likely alternative is an actual win by Trump, which would potentially end democracy in the United States as we know it. On the other hand, SCOTUS allowing a state to disqualify Trump following a civil trial would likely produce electoral chaos. Let's say, for example, that a liberal state Supreme Court in an electorally critical state, such as Wisconsin, determined that Trump is ineligible to run, and SCOTUS let that decision stand. What would the GOP do then? And that should occur, if that should occur, before the GOP convention, would the party attempt to broker a new nominee? Or would they stick to Trump, even knowing that he cannot win the White House without his name on the ballot in Wisconsin? MAGA voters in Wisconsin and around the country might stage large protests against the decision, and now the Democrats look like the anti-democratic ones, even if it was the Republican-dominated Supreme Court that let the decision stand. Such a ruling might embolden other state officials to strike Trump's name from their own state ballots. And in response, red state officials might strike Joe Biden's name to make a point. SCOTUS might try to step in again to rule on the law, but at this point, things would be unraveling quickly. Given the stakes, we could see a punt from the court to imagine SCOTUS remanding the case to the trial court with instructions to apply a different standard or definition of engaged in insurrection than one that was used. Would there even be time before the primary for a ruling, or would the ruling simply preserve the status quo of having Trump's name on the ballot, while allowing a judge to determine later if he's ineligible. Again, the mind reels, because none of these outcomes is particularly great, either for democracy or for the future of our country. From where I sit, I could see the appeal and the strength of a straightforward Section 3 disqualification argument, but I can also see how allowing the legal system to decide an essentially political question carries enormous risks. The optimist in me believes that if Trump is beaten fairly and squarely in the election, our democracy will be strengthened by that. But the pessimist in me worries that no matter how Trump is defended, either by operation of law or the ballot box, his supporters will simply never accept the outcome. Nearly 23 years ago, our Supreme Court ruled 5-4 along partisan lines to deliver the election to George W. Bush. The Democratic candidate, along with Democrats nationwide, accepted the finality of that decision. That we have little faith that MAGA extremists would do the same today, even with a ruling from a Supreme Court of their own making, speaks volumes of how far and how quickly our democracy has deteriorated. Still, a decision from SCOTUS and yet another pivotal moment for our country looks increasingly likely, and we had best prepare ourselves for it. The end. Okay, so if your head is spinning from this article, don't feel bad, because mine is too. But it does bring up some interesting points. Okay, I don't think this problem can be solved by a state-by-state, court proceeding. And the reason being is that, if we let each state decide whether to knock somebody off a ballot or not, okay, how are you fairly going to count an election vote when you have some states that have the name on a ballot and some states that don't? I mean, how do you decide an election outcome based on that strategy, where you let red states have this guy on here and this guy not on here? Think about that. Each state doing their own thing. That's not a United States. And I think when you're talking about a federal election, it has to involve every state. They all have to be on the same fucking page. That means everybody's got to have the same ballot with the same names on the fucking ballot. It would be nice if we could get all the states that even have the same kind of election process, but apparently that part is left up to the state itself. That's why some states use ballots that have holes in them and some don't, and you just marking it. Every state does it differently, but at least they all have the same choices there. Okay, on the federal side. State side it's different, obviously, but for federal choices, they all should have the same choices there. Okay. And the only reason I think that, a person's name shouldn't be on a ballot, who wants to be on there, has to be a federal reason, which means it has to stay, it has to be decided in the Supreme Court. Okay, it does. It's going to have to be decided there. They cannot punt this. All right, they may want to try that, because that means they're going to have to probably put Trump under the spotlight more than they want to. Because remember, our Supreme Court is, 6-3 in the favor of Republicans? All right. So, even though I don't like the idea of this decision being handled by the Supreme Court, it's a Supreme Court matter, and it has to be answered by them and them alone, okay? I don't think each state should deal with this on its own, because that's going to create the very sort of destruction of our democracy that we all hope won't happen. Okay, once that starts, you can never stop that from ever happening again. Every election, every state's going to decide, I don't want this guy on the back. How are you going to stop that? Once you start that, you can't stop it. So we have to keep this thing focused on the federal level, which means the Supreme Court is going to have to say yes or no whether Trump's name can be on the fucking ballot. Okay, and that's the only two answers this country is going to accept. One or the other. No in between. No maybe yes, maybe no. It's got to be yes or no. And it doesn't matter. Either answer is going to cause an uproar in this country, one way or the other. And that should be expected. And like I said, it's unfortunate that in the look of the odds, the way things are, Trump could actually get away with it, okay, by getting his name on the ballot. Therefore, the the result of the election will actually go back into the hands of the voters. I mean, do you really want to see him in office or not? Okay, it'll be put on our backs to decide whether Trump deserves to be back in the White House or not. So what should be a constitutional answer based on the rules that we have in place about who can be on an election ballot or not, any case we bring on the state level or the federal level, especially now with the Republicans controlling the Supreme Court, it's going to get punted to us. Okay, we're the ones that's going to have to make the final decision on what happens with Trump. Okay, it's not the way it's meant to be played out. Okay, a thing like this, the federal government has to decide whether a guy should be running for office or not. Okay, and like I said, because the Supreme Court is probably not going to want to make that choice. Okay. If they don't make that choice or they give it to another, I mean, I don't expect this ever to get resolved before the election. I really don't. If the court doesn't want to make a decision on this and they decide to give this problem to the states or something, I mean, that's really going to be the end of the democracy that we know, because after that day, they've just laid new groundwork now for every future election that comes after. Okay? States are going to just deem their opponents to be unworthy of the office, and they're all going to have their name taken off the ballot. That's going to be the excuse from here on out, because the Supreme Court didn't have the balls to fucking make precedent on their own, on a federal level, to stop states from ever doing that. Because if they do it, guess what? Democrats are going to do it. And then what kind of a fucking election system are you going to have at the end of the day? Okay? What really are you going to have? The legitimacy of every president from this point on is going to be in question from here on out. Okay, you can stop counting numbers, 45th, 46th president, okay, because after that it's going to be a question mark. Were these people really voted in office, or was this all rigged by every fucking state in the country to get whoever they wanted in there? Okay, because they played, not only did they give them permission to redistrict their state, but they also gave them permission to whether or not they want to put a person's name on a ballot. I mean, how many more ways do you want to cheat, for Christ's sake, to get their, Republicans don't have anything left but to cheat in order to win, because they've got no policy that anybody gives a shit about. They don't want to hear about it. The Republicans know this. They've got no leg to stand on, and they can't offer anything that people like. Okay? So the only thing they got in their chest of war tools, or whatever you want to call it, is mudslinging, slander, and doing what they're doing now, like Hunter Biden, okay, which is basically nothing. And now they want to try to impeach President Biden for things they haven't even got evidence to prove yet. But, what's the speaker there? He wants to go ahead and get this ball rolling on impeachment. Well, there's 30 Republicans that I know of that aren't even going to be in favor of that. Okay, so he doesn't even have the support he needs from his own party to go ahead with this. All right, and the fact that he boldly comes out and says this stuff, and he actually, he did use the word alleged or accused or something. None of what he said yesterday in that 5-minute brief or whatever had anything in there that said anything about having proof of anything. Okay, because you cannot bring a case to court based on alleged things. You got to have proof to present in order to justify the court to have a trial or an impeachment on the matter. And believe me, if they had this information, they wouldn't have made a big showboat about it yesterday in front of the cameras and saying, we're gonna do this. They'd already done it. Okay, they would have already done it, and then they would have told us about what they were doing. Okay, but instead they go the other way around. Why? Because they're trying to win the approval of the court of public opinion. Okay, they're trying to get their base rallying behind them. That's why they did it the way they did. They have nothing. Okay, they have absolutely nothing. No proof of anything. Just like when they went after Hillary Clinton on Benghazi 8 fucking times. Okay. They had nothing on her, and they grilled her for half a day, for Christ's sake, trying to get her to do what? Confess for nothing. Okay, did they really think she was actually, I mean, if she was guilty, did they really think she was going to answer their questions truthfully? No. Would they? Of course not. So they wasted their time, and the only reason why they kept doing that was to try to destroy her appeal to the public. That was a circus act for us. Okay, they knew she'd deny and deny and deny. And people in this country, when you hear somebody saying, "I didn't do it, I didn't do it," then in their minds, they did do it. Every time you scream you didn't do it, you did do it. Okay, that's the way we think. We're so how do you say it? Cynical. We're such a cynical society that every time we're told something by the TV or the government or something like that, we immediately think it's a lie. Okay, we don't even cogitate on the fact that it's true. You realize that there was a lot of people on September 11th, and still some today, who don't even think that really happened? That's true. There's a lot of people out there that don't think 9/11 really happened. You could take them down to fucking New York City and show them the new building standing in the spot where those buildings are. They still ain't gonna believe it. Okay? And I don't know why that is, but those are the same people, a lot of them, who still think that Trump won the election. And so you see, that's how diluted people's thinking can get. All right? And that's why back in the day when Hillary was being grilled by Congress and all that, or Senate, whatever, when she was being grilled, that's why they kept her there, so she would keep saying, "No, I didn't do it, I didn't do it," you know, because they knew the public was going to turn that inside out in their minds, especially from their own people, their own Republican voters. Okay, where the Democrats, by and large, were just, you know, saying, "This is bullshit, you know, she did nothing, they've got no evidence or anything." The right wing was all saying, "Yeah, look at her, she's lying out her ass, she's denying this and that," you know. That's what they were thinking. And every time she said no, it came back as a yes in their minds, because they're so spun by their own party's bullshit, you know. And these people couldn't help themselves. All right, that's why to this day, when you talk to them about Trump and everything, they start screaming back, you know, Benghazi, and, you know, put her in jail, you know, and in prison her, and every, you know, they just go back on that friggin' bullshit like it's actual fact, and nothing was ever proven out of that. They got nothing out of 8 friggin' hearings. They got nothing on her. Okay, nothing. Yet with Donald Trump, on the other hand, there's more evidence than we could ever have hoped to have gotten out of this thing against Trump. We got more evidence on that that's already proven in the court of public opinion in the form of audio recordings, like the phone call to Georgia. Okay, plus we got testimony from people on the ground. We got video recordings of what went on January 6th, prior to January 6th and after, to show that there were other heads in the background involved in this thing other than Trump. Okay, we got arrests from people who were tried, like the Proud Boys there, you know, some of them, and the leader got, what, 20 years or something? We got people already arrested and serving time for what they did. So, I mean, we got all kinds of the court of public opinion information to already suggest that Trump is guilty in our eyes, okay? The fact that the courts aren't so quick to go to it goes to show you that the law is never clear on anything, especially on a scale like this. When it involves someone who had the seat of president in this country, you know, chances are they'll either avoid the court action or simply just, you know, cut deals or some damn thing, like what happened, you know, before, like with Nixon or something like that. It's never going to get that far. This is as far as we've ever gone against an ex-president, okay, not a sitting president, but an ex-president, in order to, you know, make him accountable for things that happened in the election where he lost. And so every day we do something about this is new ground. We're breaking new ground. And the last thing anybody should be doing is trying to cut corners on this or try to misread the intentions of, you know, the amendment here in question. Okay, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that, because if we put our brand of thought onto something that was decided on long ago, all right, then you might as well just say, well, we really don't need the amendments we got because they're outdated. Okay, and maybe they are in some degree, but that doesn't mean you can't reinterpret that for the times. But by trying to say that they don't apply, okay, or that they're unclear to the point of being, you know, anybody's guess, that's not being fair. Okay, that's not being fair. You got to try and understand it, and understand that these people were thinking about the possibility of a leader taking control of the government who was not on their side. Okay, like what happened in Germany with Hitler, right? But this is before their time. You know, that was after their time. But just for the sake of discussion, you know, they were trying to lay the groundwork to protect their own government, and they wanted to make sure that somebody like a Hitler, you know, or somebody in their day would not just slip into control of the government and turn the whole thing inside out. They had to put something down. Okay, and so they come up with the idea of a person having been aligned with some anti-government elements involved in trying to bring down the government, not being allowed to serve as its leader. Okay, and and why wouldn't they want to say that? That's pretty a basic thing. Okay, and of course, them being who they were and dealing with legal matters, they worded things in such a way that left possibilities or something like that open. And that's what the right wing is trying to do right now. They're trying to tear apart that amendment in order to find loopholes, possibilities, ways to try to get over this thing without actually having to step on this landmine, okay, which could blow up in Trump's face. They don't want to do this. You know, they're going to hire as many fucking lawyers as they can to work this thing out. But they really can't, because this is a thing that has to be done by the Supreme Court. They're the final word on this constitutionally, all right? No matter what the lawyers, the defense attorneys might come up with, at the end of the day, it's going to be the Supreme Court that's really going to have to decide this thing and lay down the groundwork for years to come, generations to come, okay? And unfortunately, we got the wrong kind of people sitting on the Supreme Court in order to do this thing fairly. And that's where my worry begins. Because if it does go there, and it probably will, we're not going to get the justice that we deserve as a nation. We're not going to get it from them. I don't think we will. You know, and if they turn their backs on Trump and they do this, not only will it be a new day in hell here for but you know, we're going to see movements in this country that we thought January 6th was bad. We ain't seen nothing yet. Okay, there's going to be a lot of friggin' strife after that. Okay, that's kind of what this article was saying, is that no matter which way this goes, it's going to end with chaos. And really, in my opinion, this has to end with the Supreme Court only. You know, only. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. So please subscribe, comment, keep your ears open for COVID-19. It's still out there. Get your shots. There's a booster shot available to people now, so please get that. And wear your mask, you know, if you feel like you need to. I mean, there's no shame in wearing a mask. I mean, sometimes I'll wear it and sometimes not. Okay, but you know, protect yourself. It makes sense, right? You know, and clean up after yourself too. You cough on something, clean it up. Don't leave germs behind. Jesus, don't teach your kids that too, because kids start habits that they would carry on into adulthood. So teach them about being clean. Okay, Mr. Clean. Okay, so treat each other nice out there. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.